Hi, my name is Scarlett, and I am an atheist and a skeptic, and lately I've been examining lots of arguments for God. And in part, what interests me is what is behind the words used. What are the core beliefs that underpin the view? In other words, how is this person conceiving of the world? And how does this argument they're making reveal it? So, on this topic, recently I was watching a clip from The Line, and this thought came into my mind. How does DeAndre, the caller, conceive of the way the world works? There's a particular moment that caught my ear and made me want to do this video, so we're skipping all the blibbity blab and just getting underway. Let's see what DeAndre has for us.
I'm incredibly optimistic because our first caller is DeAndre from Tennessee, who wants to make his case for creation. DeAndre, welcome. You're on with Andrew and Matt.
Hi, yeah, I'm calling from Tennessee. Yeah, so I basically just wanted to make a case, or I basically get more information from you guys about if you don't believe in God, what is your worldview on creation or where
I'm
the
just so
original
confused
point?
because it says here you were calling in to make a case for creation, and then right off the bat you want us to give our case being opposed to creation. But I don't know what. There's a lot of different creation stories. So what good would it do for me to tell you why I'm opposed to creation story 1, 2, and 3 if yours is number 7?
Well, I guess it's just because I originally believed that you don't believe it, which is why I asked, why don't you believe it, instead of making a case on why you should.
This happens a lot on this kind of show. A caller tells the screener they want to make their case for God or intelligent design or creation, whatever. And then they flip the script and ask why the atheists on the show don't accept whatever the caller has in mind. For DeAndre, it sounds like he takes his view as a default, and other people have to explain to him why he's wrong, instead of him looking for evidence to support what he believes. And since we're in a US setting, we can presume the caller has the Bible creation in mind, but I do like that Matt says he doesn't know which one DeAndre wants to defend. Fair point. There are a lot of different creation stories, and the differences are quite striking. Toward the end of this section, DeAndre says he originally believed Matt doesn't believe it, the creation story. So it sounds like DeAndre thinks there is a single story, totally ignoring what Matt just said. It's almost like he's asking, why don't you believe in my view, which you don't even know? DeAndre, get out of your head. We don't know what's going on in there. For all we know, it's just tumbleweeds blowing around. Let's skip past some of Matt's answer. Among other things, he says he doesn't believe creation stories due to insufficient evidence for them, whereas there is a physical model that explains events in the universe. So DeAndre asks this.
And what exactly is that event?
Events. Every event.
So DeAndre is still stuck in his head, I guess, not even listening, or maybe he can't even hear around whatever creation story is buzzing around in there. And he probably wants Matt or Eric to say something about not believing in God. I'm not sure about that, of course, but I just suspect that DeAndre is stuck on something akin to a Genesis creation event and God poofing all things into being. So whatever Matt says sounds like one of those adults in a Peanuts cartoon. Wah, wah, wah. So we'll skip the next part where Matt lists a bunch of physical events in the timeline of our universe, and Eric adds, we could still say we don't know about the creation event, and that we don't know answer wouldn't add to proof of God, which is a great point. It's not up to Matt and Eric to demonstrate that God doesn't exist. DeAndre purportedly wants to make a case for creation. Let's go back in.
Well, I can use logical reasoning on that the fact that the universe is here, that means that it had to have been started up and created by someone. I mean,
No, you can't.
the reason why
No, you can't. No, you can't. Let's do that then. Start with the universe and explain how you can demonstrate that it must have been created by some person.
Well, for starters, if you observe the universe at its current state, you'll be able to see that it's decaying or it's winding down. So that means it had to be wound up to begin with. That's just common knowledge.
So here is the first issue in DeAndre's thinking. He says that the mere fact that the universe is here is pretty good evidence that it had to have been started up and created by someone. Why is there something rather than nothing? Am I right? We see this everywhere in theist thinking. A discomfort that matter and energy could just exist without some conscious agent making a choice to create them. I'm seeing it in comments on some of my videos related to the argument from fine tuning. The idea that the universe has settings that allowed for life is just too amazing. The arguments are just not on the atheist side. Something must have put those settings there. It's all just so amazing it can't be coincidence, right? Can't be random or just the way things are. Someone had to set it up. And then the fact that the universe is winding down, as DeAndre says, means that someone had to wind it up, like a clock. And what we have here is a language problem. DeAndre is sort of fooling himself with language use, and the idea of the universe as some kind of clock that needs an agent winding it up. And while we're on the topic, lots of theists like the idea of our solar system as clock, that the deity designed perfectly this perfect calendar for us. And of course they ignore that we designed a calendar around the sun and moon and all that, and it is far from perfect, and it took us a long time to get right. Lots of stories out there about how calendars got out of whack with the seasons and whatnot. But I'm off track here. Let's get back to DeAndre. We're going to skip the part where Matt disputes the winding up and says that that explanation is not part of the scientific model. Let's go back in.
Okay, I mean, well, the scientific model changes. I mean, at first it was the Big Bang, and then it was
Do you know why? Do you know why the scientific model changes?
because they're not sure. They can't explain it.
No.
So this is a classic, right? Science always be changing, so how can we trust anything? And it's always changing because scientists don't have the answer. And I think there's a real discomfort with the fact that we can't have 100% certainty about how stuff works, that we have to adjust our thinking as we learn new stuff. Now, religion gives a false sense of certainty. And of course, we know that religion does adjust and change to fit the current cultural climate. But in a believer's mind, like a Christian's mind, Genesis as a book has been around, well, like forever. And, I am assuming Genesis and the magical poofing god we find there, that this is what DeAndre has in mind. Of course, I can't be certain about people being uncomfortable with the notion that things change and that we have to adjust our thinking, but I am inferring it from the fact that these people point out the change. The fact that they point out tells me they think there's a problem. Those of us who follow science know that science updates as it moves forward and finds out new stuff. So Matt has a good answer about science adjusting to allow for new information and that some things won't change. Some things are just tweaked. Then Matt asks where DeAndre has the idea that there must be a person who wound things up and started the universe on its merry journey.
Well, I don't believe it's a person. So by definition, science can't explain the beginning of it because it's only the observation of it at its current state. So
no, that's not true.
Science is not gonna,
you fundamentally don't understand science. So
I think there is an equivocation on the word observe. So many people assume, incorrectly, that the observation must be a direct visual of something as opposed to other data that you can collect. And of course, that's just wrong. There's all kinds of things that you could observe without seeing them. And what it sounds like to me is that DeAndre thinks that because science can't do some specific thing he thinks needs to happen, he is justified in popping a god in that spot. And Matt is right. DeAndre has some fundamental misunderstanding about science. So Matt explains some of the science, asks for clarification on the person or agent as creator since DeAndre doesn't think the creator is a person. Let's go back in.
I believe it was the exact thing that is outside of all of what was created. So that means that it's
my question, DeAndre, was do you think it was an intelligent agent? And your answer was that you think it's the same thing that is outside of whatever. Do you think it's an intelligent agent?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at the design of what the universe is.
So when I say that you think it's a person is what I mean when I say an intelligent agent.
Okay, gotcha.
So what's the justification?
So
I do like how DeAndre starts by avoiding identifying God. It's just this being outside of the creation, wherever that is. DeAndre must imagine some void or something where this being is looking at us as if we're its snow globe. And of course, it's a thinking agent. I mean, he can't imagine something different. So Matt does some of the explanation of science and how we look back at the formation of the universe and that we can't get past what we call the Planck time and we can't get outside of it. So he wants to know how DeAndre is getting the idea for a deity.
So it's the same way that in the way that I use, the reason I don't come on and use religious theories based off of the Bible, because I'm Christian, but that's not going to hold any weight. I like to just observe the world around you and then make inferences just like scientists do. So you wouldn't then look at a building.
No.
He stops DeAndre because DeAndre is not answering the question. Surprise, surprise. So DeAndre confirms here he's a Christian, so I think we can safely assume that Genesis is really guiding his perceptions, and not necessarily a good reading of Genesis either, just some generic God poofing everything in a week kind of Genesis without thinking about what all of it means or without knowing what it all means. And DeAndre, like any good pseudoscientist, likes to just look at the world and make inferences. Don't know how to break it to this dude, but that's a terrible way to do science. How can you be sure you're getting past your biases and your erroneous conceptions? And especially, how do you know you're not just looking at the world and saying, isn't God's creation amazing? So Matt repeats his question. This is how these shows go. How does DeAndre know something exists where science can't look, i.e. a God outside of what we know?
Okay, so if space, time, and material all came into existence at the same point, then
we don't know that.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Would you look at a building and assume that it just was created on its own?
It's really clear that DeAndre wants to make the leap from stuff exists to some agent created it. And here we have the watchmaker and Ray Comfort's building needs a builder, thing needs a thinger. Matt repeats his question here again.
You would have, by your definition, you'd have to physically be there to demonstrate the proof of that.
It's not about my definition. It's about yours. How can you confirm that there's an intelligent agent outside space and time?
By the byproduct. How can you confirm that there's an intelligent agent behind your iPhone or your phone that you're on right now? It's because you're using it with the design intent.
Because there's absolutely...
So DeAndre wants to posit a God in some space outside of our universe, even though he can't demonstrate it. And when he talks about, by your definition, you would have to be there to demonstrate it, I think what he's getting at is he wants to posit a weakness of science, that science can't get at his proposed intelligent agent right now. And yet he wants to appeal to science too. He wants it both ways. There's this divide that theists just can't bridge between belief and science. And of course, Matt points out, rightly so, I think it's not about definitions, it's about DeAndre claiming to have knowledge of some being, and Matt wants to get at some demonstration of said being. How do you know it's there? And of course, DeAndre can't demonstrate it, because we would have that demonstration. We wouldn't be bouncing around with all of this nonsense that he's talking, and we wouldn't have this watchmaker for the iPhone age. So Matt stops him to explain all the evidence that we have that things like phones are made by humans. All the documents and pictures and whatnot. Everything that we have that show that iPhones are made by humans and they don't just pop into existence. And then we get this, which I absolutely love.
This is something that we can
what if it wasn't?
This is something we can... Did you just say, what if it wasn't?
Yeah, what if you didn't? What if you?
No,
weren't-
I
what
just
if you
give
weren't in
you...
the
No.
factory?
I just give you a robust explanation that shows the difference between your terrible analogy about a phone compared to the universe, and your answer is, what if it wasn't? That's your...
What if it wasn't? DeAndre asks. What if we didn't have all that evidence that iPhones were designed, produced, marketed, and sold by humans? Checkmate, I guess? Priceless. I wonder what is underneath this objection. What if you didn't have the evidence you just laid out for me? Does DeAndre imagine that we could lose all the evidence for human-created phones and then be justified in imagining that iPhones pop into existence? Does he imagine that God left a user's manual somewhere in Eden and we just don't have it anymore? I mean, I would think he would point to the Bible and Genesis for his so-called evidence, but obviously that book isn't very specific and it doesn't match what science knows. So anyway, Matt tries again. How does DeAndre know there is a God beyond space and time?
Right. So by your logic is you're not
No, no,
able
no.
to, but
No, that
but
was a question, DeAndre. You don't get to say right by your logic. It's a question. How can you confirm an intelligent agent outside of space and time? We're not moving on until you answer this. So don't try and dodge again.
you have to. Okay, no, that's fine. You have to look at the creation and justify that by its creation.
One of the striking things about dialogues like these is how the person who believes in something they can't demonstrate actually wants to try to poke holes in something about the non believer's beliefs. So DeAndre really wants to find a flaw in Matt's logic. But Matt is not the one who claims to believe in this deity beyond space and time, and he's also not saying that the being doesn't exist at all. Right now, what he's trying to establish is how does DeAndre know this? And of course, DeAndre doesn't know anything. He believes, and he thinks the fact that anything exists at all allows the default to be that an intelligent agent is responsible. And probably underneath it all, there is some anxiety about the universe just existing and doing its thing. And to say that there's some magic agent relieves that anxiety. Now, during this section, Matt is trying to clarify his question. DeAndre once again interjects with, "What do you propose?" Again, not answering the question, not laying out any evidence. It's like he doesn't quite hear what Matt is saying, doesn't quite understand it, and he wants Matt to lay something out for them to tug at, not really have DeAndre put something out for them to tug at. So anyway, Matt tries to clarify the problem with language, that you can't call it a creation until you can demonstrate that there is a creator.
How not? If you didn't have, let me ask you this question. If you
No.
didn't have,
Answer my
if you,
question.
hold on.
No.
I kind of want to know what DeAndre's question is, because I would love to hear more about his conception of, well, everything really. But Matt wants an answer to his own question, and I get that. He has a great passage about DeAndre either revealing his method and bringing the heathens out of ignorance, or admitting he doesn't have any kind of method. I recommend going to watch the whole clip, but it is always striking to me how theists try to flip the conversation around, how they want an explanation about how atheists don't accept the conclusion that seems so natural to them, and yet all they have is a supposition.
An intelligent agent has intelligent design. And that's the only thing I can say because that's the only proof that you can have. If you're looking at an intelligent agent,
I'm going to mute you.
An intelligent agent has intelligent design. Yeah, right? This just tells me how deep into his indoctrination DeAndre is. That he has listened to preachers and family members and I don't know whoever talk about Bible God, and now it just seems intuitive to him. He can overlook any dumb design and all the shitty things that happen and, just look at the nice things and say, look at this great world that the deity made. Matt calls his utterance a nonsensical, irrelevant statement, which, yeah, pretty much. It's just it really is just nonsense. Like, what does that even mean? And he passes it over to Eric, who calls out the watchmaker and says that a flaw in the watchmaker is that everything looks intelligently designed. So how can you distinguish God-made things? How can you know it's God-made? How did DeAndre distinguish between designed and undesigned things, or man-made and God-made?
so you do that every day that you are in the world. I mean, you do that
with
every day that you're in the world.
man-made things. DeAndre, I do that with man-made things. You're trying to do that with God-made things. So what point of comparison do you have between God-made and not God-made?
Okay, can you make a tree out of nothing, or do you have to first have
DeAndre, answer my question. DeAndre, I need you to answer my question.
Can you make a tree? Just like, how far outside the conversation can you go? And while it is utter nonsense, DeAndre is not the only person I have heard ask, can you make a tree or some other natural thing? In this view, something is either man-made or it's God-made, and if a person can't make it, then it must be God-made. And again, I think it shows how deep DeAndre is in his indoctrination. But I'm really missing the connection on this way of thinking, like, how is my inability to do a particular thing meaningful in terms of establishing that there is a creator? It isn't. The fact that we can't replicate something doesn't mean anything.
I guess I'm not understanding your question because it's all in nature as well.
It's
Are you
okay.
asking me?
Yes. Go ahead. Ask me your question. Ask me the follow-up what you were just about to say there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So are you asking me that in nature, is there proof of an intelligent design outside of man-made things?
No.
At least DeAndre is starting to perceive his lack of understanding, but again, he seems to assume if something isn't made by humans, his God did it. Eric tries again.
So I'm still confused by the question. So when you compare a man-made item, an iPhone, to a seed of a tree, the iPhone serves the purpose that the man created it for. The tree, when you plant the seed in the ground, naturally it grows from the ground. That was something that God made. We can't replicate a tree seed. We can
So
only make.
that's where you're making that's where you're making this logical leap.
It is fascinating to watch this worldview unveil itself. An iPhone is like a seed. The utility of man-made things is compared to the utility of natural things, and the leap, as Eric says, is huge. First off, how do you even compare a phone to a seed? I just don't see the analogy. What I see is someone who is very confused. There's just this assumption, first of all, that a seed will grow into a tree. Not like billions of seeds won't do anything, they'll just go out there and not turn into trees. But anyway, the assumption is that it is put out there to grow into a tree. And that's nothing like a phone, which is not going to grow into anything. I mean, it's already what it is. Anyway, I'm always struck by this thought that if we can't make something, like in this case a seed, then there must be some spaceless, timeless thinking agent who created it. And that particular agent sent his son to die on a cross and thinks it's wrong to be gay and wants to give some money to a church.
So was it the cause of random events that a tree that naturally grows from the ground, that we can't recreate the seeds, but it can continue to make more? Like, what? I don't understand the alternative to the byproduct of creation that it works on its own. I don't understand the alternative. If it wasn't intelligently designed, then why?
I can understand that.
What is the alternative, DeAndre asks, again, trying to turn it around. And again, thinking that his assumptions, which are based on being indoctrinated into a religion, are the default, and it is up to atheists to prove him wrong. Eric rightfully repeats that even if he said he doesn't know, that doesn't establish a God.
But to answer your question, I think there's either naturalistic or not naturalistic processes, right? So,
right.
And again, with what's the alternative? DeAndre still needs an alternative. And of course, as Eric says, the alternative is that there are natural processes. And he goes on to say he hasn't seen a God process, so he thinks that the natural processes are all we need.
So I infer that everything I've seen, not true? Do you have a God-made process you can point to?
No.
Yes, so something that you cannot replicate that is natural in the world that you live in, but you can't.
How do you know that's a God process?
You don't get to say that something that occurs naturally is God-made. You have to prove that.
Yeah.
So
just because you don't know where it came from doesn't automatically make it God-made.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you, if I can't make something, does that mean that it must be God-made?
No, but it's above.
No, don't say but. Don't say but. Don't say but. It's a yes or no question. Repeatedly here. Shut up.
Don't say but. Don't say but. I just love that. Isn't this the reason we watch Matt Dillahunty? To see him go off on some poor soul with confused thoughts? Just delicious. Just inject that energy right into my veins. DeAndre says that making a tree is above your process of creation. And I don't know what that means. This is just a sentence that makes me wonder what is going on in this man's mind. And how did he determine it was created at all, not just something that formed through natural processes? And again, how is this an argument for God? It just isn't. It's just an assumption from intuitions from indoctrination. Ooh, intuitions from indoctrination. That would be a good album title. So let's watch Matt get pissed off a little bit more at DeAndre, who says that he's not making this argument. We don't get to hear exactly what argument he's making, although I think it's just he wants an alternative. And then we get the gem that made me want to make this video.
Shut up. Every time we've given an example, your thing is, can you make a tree? And now I've asked, if there's something that I can't make, does that mean it's God-made? And you rightly answered no, which means just because I can't personally make a tree doesn't mean that the tree is made by a God. You have to demonstrate that a tree is made by God. Can you do that?
So that's not the argument that I'm making. The argument that
I
I'm
asked
making
you
is,
a
can a
fucking
tree?
question. Can you do that? Yes or no?
Yes.
Cool. Do it. Prove that something was made by God.
Okay.
It's what we've been waiting on
Okay.
for
So
17 fucking minutes here.
okay. So the alternative to what you're saying is, if a creator didn't make it, whatever definition you want to call that, God, if an intelligent designer did not create it, we should be seeing trees spawn out of the sky, because that's what the alternative would be.
No.
So finally, DeAndre says he can prove it, and this is what we get. The alternative would be to see trees spawn out of the sky. I have no words. I have no idea why he would posit this. It just makes zero sense. It makes even less sense than, can you make a tree? Now, this video goes on for another bit with Eric and Matt trying to get DeAndre to distinguish between a universe created by a god and one that's not, and he simply doesn't understand the question. I really do think it's like that Peanuts character listening to the adults, the womp, 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 womp. To him, the god inference is just so obvious, and one he can't clean out of his brain. He admits that just because a person can't make a tree, it doesn't mean a god did it, but he returns that if we can't do it, a god must have done it. A tree seems designed for a purpose, so it must be. The only other gem that emerges is he asks why the Big Bang only happened once. And there's so much wrong with that question, just like every other question he asks. Eric suggests DeAndre actually go learn some science, and all I can think is I feel sorry for any teacher who crosses DeAndre's path. He has a hard row to hoe. So what are some of DeAndre's bad thought habits? The first, and this is the source of so much else that's wrong, DeAndre mistakes his inferences for some default truth that needs to be dislodged. And I get why. We all think we've come to our conclusions neatly and logically. But if you have a conclusion that you are sure is convincing, there should be a path toward demonstrating how your thoughts align with reality. It's this inference that leads to 2. Instead of establishing how he knows what he claims, he asks for alternative explanations to dislodge his own. What do you propose? What's the alternative? Now, it's great to seek out other explanations, but the absence of something different doesn't establish the truth of yours. You need to have evidence for your explanations. You can line up all of your different explanations and see where is the evidence. But the fact that there aren't alternative explanations doesn't establish the truth of yours. This isn't a game of last thought standing in which a lack of challengers allows your bad thought to remain on the board. And then we have the logical fallacies, the arguments from incredulity, the argument from ignorance, and just God of the gaps, just everywhere, all over the place, all the time. And the thing I never understand, if my interlocutor can't make a natural thing, a tree in this case, must be God. Just the ignorance involved, that all things are made, a sort of generalization of seeing agency where none exists. And then this new one to me, trees would grow in the sky if there were no God. That one frankly boggles my mind. Why stop with trees? Why isn't the sky full of all manner of beings and things, a veritable cornucopia of shit? And what's even more amazing to me, if the sky were full of things like trees, that would be great evidence of some batshit creator and supernatural, because trees can't just take hold in the stratosphere or wherever. So that's where we're ending today's video. What struck you about DeAndre and this conversation? Put it in the comments below. I love to read your comments. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuffing, pour out your libations to Algorithmo and his consort Algorithma, that they may bless you with many, many good recommendations. And maybe you'll get some stupid ones, like somebody like DeAndre, talking garbage. Who knows? YouTube is a cornucopia of shit. That should be their logo. That should be their tagline. Oh, and if you like what I do, you can buy me a coffee. Here are my cute kitties with a QR code to show you the way to buy them some kibble, because that's what they think you're doing. And I'm not sure what's up next. My life has been kind of busy. I've got a bunch of stuff planned. It's just a matter of getting it down, getting to the recorder, and putting my thoughts down. So, don't know what it is, but it's gonna be stupid. Bye for now.